and becomes a resident alien. Not an illegal alien, but a resident alien. And so Abraham and Isaac were resident aliens, even though Isaac was born in the land. He was the first generation to be born there, and he was still called a good, a resident alien, because his father, Abraham, was a resident alien. And they came as resident aliens because this was the land that Adonai had given them. But if you remember, we see that not only did Abraham buy permanent property, Jacob bought permanent property in the land of Canaan. So even though they had permanent property there, Abraham and Isaac were called resident aliens or proselytes. In fact, the word good is also the word for a proselyte, someone that joins another country, joins another society, joins another religion, joins another group of people. Anybody who's a new person in any group, culture, society, nation is a proselyte or a religion. You could become a proselyte in any religion. By the way, I just heard recently that the Pope made a declaration that Catholics should not proselytize and evangelize and encourage people to join the Catholic Church. Can you imagine that? To me, if you have a society, a group, a religion, you'd want them to be part of your faith. By the way, this should never happen to us. One of the most important things that we've been commanded by Yeshua is go out and make disciples. We need to proselytize. Now, for some reason, proselytizing is looked upon as bad in our society, in our culture, because everybody thinks that everybody should have their own religion. Oh, respect their religion, and they should respect your religion. Well, we're not talking about religion. We're talking about life and death. We're talking about life and death. Because if you see a house on fire and you're walking by and you say, oh, that's their house, let them stay there. Why should I try to bring them to safety? You would do anything, knock on the doors, break the windows, break the door down to go out and save a life. In a sense, the whole world, every religion, the Muslims, not just those people that are pagans and lost, not just the drug addicts, not just the alcoholics, not just these people, but people that are Muslims, people that are Jehovah's Witnesses, people that are Mormons, they're lost. And we should proselytize them. To proselytize means to make him a proselyte, to make him a new believer. And how do we do that? We preach the gospel to them. The gospel is something that must be preached. The gospel is something that needs to be preached constantly into every group, every religion, every culture. We need to bring them out of those cultures. We need to bring them out of those societies and preach the gospel to them. The gospel must be preached. Over here we have Yaakov. And Yaakov settled in the land of Canaan. He was not a proselyte no more. He was actually now a true resident of the land of Canaan. Now, verse 2, by the way, like always, verse 2 is what really should have been 37:1. In the Hebrew structure, a whole new section begins with verse 2. And verse 2 begins with another toldot. Remember, we talked about the word toldot. The word toldot means this is the generations of, this is the genealogy of, this is the story of, so a whole new group begins. Now we begin with Yaakov. Remember, Yaakov's name had been changed from Yaakov to Israel. So this is really the beginning of the life of what we call Israel, Jacob and his sons. And it says, this is the story, or these are the generations of Jacob. Now, some of your Bibles have this are the generations, or this is the story of Joseph. But in the Hebrew, those of you that could read Hebrew, it says, Ele toldot Yaakov. The Hebrew says, Ele toldot Yaakov. This is the generations of Jacob. Joseph being 17 years old. Now, we begin the story of Joseph when he's 17 years old. Now, remember who Joseph was. Remember who Joseph was. And remember the story of Jacob going to Haran, para Aram, to Haran to get a wife. And he falls in love with Rachel. He falls in love with Rachel. He sees Rachel at the well and falls in love with this girl. And his heart is so attracted to this girl. His heart is so given to this world that when he asked for her hand in marriage, Laban, the father, says, yes, I'll give her to her if you work for 7 years. So he worked for Laban for 7 years. And it says in the Torah there that those 7 years went like 7 days because of the love he had for her. But if you remember the story, in the morning when he woke up, it wasn't Rachel that was in the tent, it was Leah, Rachel's sister. And Laban had deceived Yaakov. And we see here that this heart of Jacob was always for Rachel. Leah had 4 children, 4 sons she gave to Jacob, but Rachel was barren. And Rachel said, I'll have children by my handmaid. So Rachel gives Jacob her handmaid as a surrogate mother for children, and the surrogate mother has 2. Leah sees this, and so she gives her servant girl to Jacob, and she has another 2. So now we have these children. Leah has 2 more kids. And we see here that Joseph, one of the things that Joseph, and this still baffles me. There's a question that we're going to ask. It says, Joseph being 17 years old was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. So Leah's children, she had 6 children, and then these 4, the 10 children. But notice that Joseph was sent with the sons of the concubines, the secondary wives, rather than the sons of Leah. Where were the sons of Leah? The sons of the 2 concubines must have been evil. The sons of the concubines must have been doing something, because all of a sudden it says Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. While they were out in the flocks, Joseph, the little boy, the 17-year-old boy, and these 4 older brothers must have been doing shenanigans, must have been doing stuff. We don't know what they were doing, but it was an evil report. Why was Joseph sent with these sons? Of course, over here we could see the 6 sons of Leah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Bilhah, Dan, and Naphtali. The sons of Zilpah, Gad, and Asher, and Joseph. There was only 11 sons at this time, the sons of Jacob. And we see here that Israel, now notice that he's called Israel, he's not called Jacob. Jacob settled. But now the scriptures, the Torah calls him not Jacob, but the Torah calls him Israel. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his sons, because he had been born to him in his old age. Now, there was more to him being born in the old age than meets the eye. Let's go further into this. Jacob loved Rachel. This was his beloved. This was his everything. And yet, he had all these kids by these other 3 women whom he didn't love, whom he didn't care for. And he showed it that he didn't love them and cared for them. And yet, his beloved Rachel was barren, if you remember. So when she had a son, when his beloved had a son, the one that he loved, the one that he treasured, the one that he really wanted, when she has a son, and remember, the first one to open the womb is the firstborn. So he actually had four firstborn sons. But Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, was his one and only son. Technically, that's the one he loved. Yes, he had these other 3 women and their 10 sons. But Joseph was special. Joseph was a treasure to him. Joseph was the one that is the son of his beloved wife. And it says that Israel loved Joseph more than his other sons. Of course, at this point, Joseph is the baby. And you know how babies are spoiled, right? The last one. How many of you are last ones? Oh, spoiled brats. And it says that he loved him more. Now, every one of us should love our children in the same way. We should love them equally. We should give to them equally. But each son and each daughter gives to the parents differently. Now, each son and daughter will love the parent 100%. Every parent is loved 100% by your children. But each one gives to the parent differently. And you could see in the personalities of each child, they're all different. They're not the same. They grow up in the same house, sometimes with the same thing, but each one's different. And sometimes the parents, as we see with the blessings in the time of Jacob's, right before he dies, and we see blessings on the 12 sons, the 12 tribes. We see blessings from Moses to the 12 tribes, from Jacob to the 12 sons. Each one is different. And sometimes parents are able to notice that this one has abilities that this one does. Of course, this one has abilities that that one doesn't. Each one has different abilities. Each one has different callings. Each one has different ways of your relationship. With all of them should be equal love, but your relationship actually in the practical is different with each one. Sometimes you could get a little more strict with this one than with this one, and so sometimes it's like juggling balls, right, parents? And this was the relationship between Joseph and his father Jacob. Jacob knew something about Joseph that was different than anybody else. Jacob knew something about Joseph, his temperament, his ways, that was different than the other 10 sons. Seems that the other 10 sons were very worldly people. But, in fact, we see the 4 sons of the 2 concubines, how they did evil things. And so Jacob, to show his love for this son, the son of his old age, the son of his beloved Rachel, the son that he sees something in this son that is different than the other ones. He makes him a coat, a sleeved coat. Now, the Hebrew word there, some people translate it as a coat of many colors, and some people translate it as a coat with sleeves. Maybe it had both. But it was a special robe, a special coat, a special talit, a special covering that he didn't give his other sons. And it says when the brothers saw this, they hated him. They hated him. They could not speak a kind word to him. Oh, you blankety blank. You know all the harsh words that are used sometimes, even among family, even among brothers and sisters. All the loser, oh, you loser, or all kinds of words that, especially when they hate someone and they don't like them, they use these words. And there was a split. Now, what's interesting, we're going to follow Joseph from here to the time he dies. Joseph is one of those people that you can't find a fault. There's, everybody has faults. We all have faults. Joseph, Daniel. We don't find faults in them. You can't say he did that wrong. Joseph was a good kid. A good 17-year-old. A good teenager. The other guys were mess ups. The other guys did all these shenanigans. And here we have Jacob, and I want you to put yourself in Jacob's shoes. Most people put themselves in the shoes of the 10 kids because maybe your father, your mother loved the firstborn, or, they had their queridos and queridas. And so you put yourself in their shoes because maybe someone treated you less and treated one of the other ones better. Bought el consentido more, better shoes or whatever. Well, I never got a bike. I never got this. I never got new shoes. And so you put yourself in the place of the 10 sons. Well, if you put yourself in the place of the 10 sons, remember, that's the place where they were bad boys. They were malcriados. And remember what malcriado means. But there was something special about Joseph. Probably since he was 2 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old. Now he's 17. There's something special about this boy, about this young man. Something that Jacob loves about him. Something that Jacob sees in his character. And it's a character that needs to be rewarded. You always want to reward good character. And you always want to punish bad character. It's not so much that Jacob hated the other 10. Jacob did not hate the other 10. It's just that there was something about this boy. He was lovable. And if you don't see that now, you're going to see it throughout the whole story of Joseph. Every one of you would love Joseph. Every one of you would love Joseph. Every one of you would look at him and say, this is a good guy. I would love to be like Joseph. In many ways, many of us are like Joseph, and in many ways, many of us are not like Joseph. But Joseph was a good guy. Now, we go to verse 5. Now remember, the brothers hated him. There was hatred, there was jealousy. Maybe part of that hatred and jealousy was because he was Rachel's boy. Can you imagine, even thinking about it right now, Leah, who always wanted Jacob's love but really never got it? The two other girls that were just used for sons, they weren't loved. They were just used for sons, for children. They were used in the jealousy between Leah and Rachel. And can you imagine the mothers complaining and telling their sons their complaints? That Jacob and his little runt, Joseph, That would even build more hatred, more jealousy, envy in them. But Jacob's choice was proper. Jacob's choice was proper. I'm in the side of Jacob, not the side of the 10. It says, now Joseph had a dream, and he repeated it to his brothers. Listen, he said, to this dream I have had. We were binding sheaves in the countryside, and my sheaf, it seemed to rose up, straight up, and your sheaves gather around it and bow to my sheaf. So remember, a sheaf is a bundle of grain. And there was these bundles of grain in the field, wrapped up. You've seen them, pictures of them. They're round about this big, and there's a tie around them. And Joseph's sheaf rose up higher. And the other sheaves kind of made a circle around it. The other 10 sheaves made a circle around it and bowed down to Joseph. Well, they got the dream. They got the dream. And what do they say? So you want to be king over us, his brothers said, or to master it over us. And they hated him still more on account of his dreams. And what he said. He had another dream. I thought I saw the sun and moon and 11 stars bowing to me. He told his father and brothers, and his father scolded him. A fine dream you have. Are all of us, then myself, your mother, and your brothers, to come and bow to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the thing in mind. Now, the father's playing referee here. You could see that so close. The father's playing referee. He's already told the brothers, the other one, and they said, you want to be our king? What are you talking about, Joseph? But now he sees another dream. And if you look closely, it says that he saw the sun, which is his father, the moon, the mother, and 11 stars. 11 stars bowing to me, the 12th star. Remember Joseph's name? What is Joseph's name? Yosef. Yosef means he added, or he will add. So when Rachel had Yosef, she was counting on having another son after Yosef. And she did. We're going to see this next week. Benjamin. Over here, Joseph, in this dream, Adonai gives him the prediction that there's going to be an 11th boy, 12 with him. And of course, the father comes to mediate because the brothers already hate him because of the first dream. Now he has this dream. But, it says, but Yaakov kept this in his heart. Yaakov knew something, that this dream was going to be fulfilled. Because these dreams were from Adonai. Remember, Yaakov had had dreams and visions before, so he knows about dreams and visions from Adonai. So now Yaakov sees this dream, and it's a dream from Adonai. This is why we need to look at Yaakov, and we need to see that Yaakov is looking at things not in the material, not in this world, not in the carnal, but in the spiritual realm. And that's the way we should be too. We should be more spiritual realm oriented than physical, worldly oriented. When things happen, so many times we just look at this world. We don't look at what Adonai is really doing in our lives. Adonai works apart from the secular, through the secular, for us. But sometimes we just look at, oh man, I'm busted. Oh, wait a second. What's Adonai doing? Verse 12. His brothers went to pasture their father's flock at Shechem. And this was all 12 of them. All 10 of them. Then Israel said to Joseph, are not all your brothers with the flock at Shechem? Come, I am going to send you to them. I am ready, he replied. Look at that obedience. Aquí estoy. A su servicio. At your service. I'm here. I'm ready. Go to Shechem. Now remember, we're talking about a 17-year-old boy. From Hebron to Shechem is about 70 miles. And a 17-year-old boy now is supposed to go check on the big brothers at Shechem, make sure that they're not going to this small town of Shechem with their horses and their guns going all over town and the saloon and all that kind of stuff. Go and see how your brothers are and the flock doing, and bring me word. He sent them from the valley of Hebron, and Joseph arrived in Shechem. Again, 70 miles away. 70, 50 as the crow flies. And they said that they were at Dothan another 15 miles later. And they saw him in the distance, verse 18. And before he reached them, they made a plot among themselves to put him to death. The 10 brothers had a plot going. Maybe it wasn't maybe it wasn't all of them. Maybe it was just some of them. But they had a plot to put him to death. Well, again, to make a long story short, it was Judah, Reuben and Judah, who saved him from the plot. And they sold him to some Ishmaelites. There was a Midianite caravan going to Egypt, and there was some Ishmaelites there, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites. And Joseph is sent to Egypt. Now, what's interesting is that the story of Joseph at the end of verse 37 stops, and we have a chapter 38 about Judah and Tamar. Last year we covered that very close, so we're not going to cover that, but just to see that this story of Joseph, this is the only thing that happens between Joseph being sold by the 10 brothers and Jacob going to Egypt. This is the only, in a sense, happening that happens in the land of Canaan. Chapter 39 continues the story of Joseph. Continues the story of Joseph and how Joseph was used by Adonai. Now, Joseph has always been considered a type of Messiah, of Yeshua. Joseph has always been considered a type of him. because of his purity, of his holiness, of being just a lovable young man, being a young, lovable person, not doing anything wrong, doing the right things, showing himself to be a man of honor, a man of, remember, there was no Torah, but Joseph was one of those guys that was Torah observant. Think of it, being Torah observant when there wasn't the Torah, knowing the right thing to do before Adonai even said, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, he did it. He was a righteous man. That's why he's always been seen as a type of Messiah. But again, he is bought by a man named Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh, when he gets to Egypt. And then we have the story of Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife desired Yosef. But remember, Yosef was pure. Yosef was holy. In a world where everybody still did their own thing, even the 10 boys, Yosef stood apart. And because he would not take her advances, and because she lied, and she said that he had done this, and this, which he hadn't, Potiphar put him in prison. And Joseph goes down. Now remember, Mikeitz means at the end of. At the end of. Now, Joseph, apart from what his brothers did to him, remember his brothers. This is some guy that should have said, I'm being bullied. In fact, today, if you're bullied, you kill yourself. What is that? Stand up to the bullies. Don't care what the bully said. Look at Joseph. Joseph was bullied by 10 brothers, bullied. And he remained pure. He remained apart. He remained close to Adonai. Now he is not killed but put in a well and then sold to the Ishmaelites. Now he becomes a slave of Potiphar. He becomes a slave. He's down. He is falsely accused. And now at the end of all that, he's in prison, in the dungeon, as low as you could go. As low as you could go. Being in a dungeon in those days is the lowest place that anybody could be. Have you ever been at that place? Have you ever been at a place close to that when you want to give up? Many people today, I don't know what the word is that they use today, but I remember when I was in high school, they would call people like that candies. Remember they used to use that word, you candy. Anybody remember those days? That's the word that was used around, All kinds of weaklings. There's weak people. We're training a generation of weak young men and young women that they want to give up at the, just a little push, a little blow. You say something even innocent to people. I'm offended. How many of you were bullied when you were kids? I remember I was bullied by Dennis Lee Trujillo and Julian Romero and I still remember the names of all the bullies. I remember in elementary school where I was going to school one morning, and my mom had bought me a real nice hat with a nice bill, you know, with those little flaps that for winter that go down. You know, one of those little hats. Who's the cartoon character that uses those hats that's always Elmer Fudd, one of those Elmer Fudd hats? Gray, I still remember it was gray. And oh, it was so warm. And I remember I was going right there by Isleta, going to Old Armijo School. And these guys, Dennis Lee and Julian, by the way, both of them are dead. They were in prison, died of overdoses. And I remember them running behind me, grabbing my hat and laughing at the hat. And they got it and they throw it on top of, and there was, today it's called Bernalillo Motors, a little transmission shop there on the Sleda and Lopez Road. And they threw it on top, and I don't know if I cried or what happened, but I went home, told my mom, and we had to go over there and tell the little old man that, so he puts I still remember putting him a ladder, he went up, got my hat. Because I was small, real small and short, everybody always laughed at me, and you know how it is. You're the last one to be picked for baseball and all that kind of stuff. They bully you and they call you all kinds of names. But instead of taking it on myself and believing their words, I decided not, even as a young man, high school and all, I decided not, who cares? I am who I am. And that's a Joseph character. And that's a character that many of you have. And especially young people, it's a character that you need to develop if you don't have it. Joseph was at the bottom. He was in the dungeon. 17 years of harassment because of who he was, Rachel's son, Jacob's beloved, the good boy. And yet, Joseph did not give up. Even there, if we go to chapter 39:21, and in the dungeon he stayed, but Yahweh was with Joseph. Look at those words. Underline that. Put that in yellow. But Yahweh was with Joseph. If you are the man, the woman, the young person that follows Torah, Yahweh is with you no matter what. If you're bullied, Yahweh is with you. If you're persecuted, Yahweh is with you. And like Daniel and the 3 young men, we know Yahweh will deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we will not bow down. We will not give up. We will stand and die like men and women of Elohim. In fact, that's what the Maccabees said. That's part of the story of the Maccabees. We will stand up. We will not let the king order us around. We will stand up. And we need to stand up. We need to stand up to the bullies and not let them take our life. The favor of Yahweh was with him. The chief jailer put Joseph in charge of the prisoners. Woo, look Look at that. The chief, the warden, makes Joseph a prisoner, the chief of the prisoners. What kind of trust do you think Joseph endeared to them? What kind of character, attitude, that even this prisoner who has been accused of trying to rape the official's wife, he should have had no trust. But because Yahweh was with him, because of him trusting in Yahweh, Yahweh blessed them. And it says, the chief jailer did not need to interfere with Joseph's administration, for Yahweh was with him, and Yahweh made everything he undertook successful. Yahweh is the one that makes things successful. Now, I want you to look at this right now. We have Joseph, who was loved by Jacob. And there's a lot of people that don't like that. The brothers were jealous. But watch this. Look at this. We have the warden who loves Joseph more than the other prisoners. What do you think the other prisoners thought? Wait a second. What's he doing? What's the jailer doing putting a convict over us? You know, look what he tried to do to Potiphar's wife. What's he doing being our leader, being our administrator? In fact, Joseph was Jacob's right-hand man. And Joseph sent him to check. Now Joseph becomes the right-hand man of the warden. He's a lovable kid. He's a lovable guy. Maybe by this time he's 18 years old. And he goes to prison. And he's in prison. But wherever you're at and you are Adonai's, and you're the beloved of Adonai, Adonai will lift you up. Always remember that, young people. Be Adonai's, and Adonai's will make you successful. Be Adonai's, and Adonai will love you and keep you and protect you. We have this story here, not just as a story, but an example for us, an example for young people. Joseph is the paradigm of a young person. Joseph is the blueprint of a young person, a young man, a young woman. If all our young men and young women could be Josephs, Yeshua was a Joseph. Beloved of his son, beloved son of the Father. Be a Joseph, young people. Be a Joseph, young ladies. Be a Joseph, young men. Be a Joseph, children. Say, I want to be like Joseph. And Adonai will bless you. And here begins Mikeitz, the 10th Parsha. And it begins there in chapter 40, verse 1. Again, at the end of this time, that the king of Egypt, cupbearer, and his baker offended the master, the king of Egypt. Remember, the cupbearer is the one that brings the cup of wine to the king. And he pours the wine in the cup and then takes the first drink. If he doesn't die, the king drinks the cup. If he dies, so be it. Whatever the cupbearer did, he offended the king. The baker too. Maybe he burnt the tortillas, we don't know. And they were both put in prison. In verse 3, it says that the commander of the guard assigned Joseph to them to attend to their ways, and they remained under arrest for some time. And both of them had dreams that night. They had a dream. Both of them had dreams. And they told their dreams to Joseph, and Joseph interprets the dreams to them. Well, they're let out of prison after their time, and one is honored according to the dream by the king. The other one is killed, hung by the king according to the dream. But what happens is that the interpretations, when they are let loose, the one who stays alive forgot about Joseph. Joseph says, give a good word to the king for me. But they forgot about Joseph, the baker, in the cupbearer. Verse 20. And so it happened, the third day was Pharaoh's birthday. By the way, this is one of the birthdays that Scripture talks about. A lot of people always ask me, can we celebrate birthdays? Well, what's important to understand is that birthdays were always recognized. We know they were recognized because it says Yeshua was 30 years old. So they knew that there was counting. There's nothing wrong with counting how old you are. It doesn't matter, now in July, I'm counting my years. Now in July, I'll be 30 years old. And so there's nothing wrong with counting your years. You're welcome to do that. But the celebrations of birthdays in Scripture, the 3 times that birthdays are mentioned, and a 4th possible one with Job, it's always the kings that have birthdays. Only kings do birthdays. There's actually a 5th with Antiochus and his birthday, and the birthday of Dionysius, December 25th. And they're all pagan. Only pagans celebrated birthdays, and the reason they did is because on the birthday, whatever your birthday year was, they would bring in the soothsayers and the zodiac, and they would find out what's going to happen the next year. And the pagan kings, the day and year of their birth actually became the new calendar for them, for the zodiac. And in sometimes the Greeks actually celebrated, the kings of the Greeks celebrated their birthday monthly. So if they were born on the 15th of June, the 15th of every month was their birthday. So they had a birthday 12 times. They had a birthday 12 times a year. And so what happened was the king had a birthday, the Pharaoh had a birthday, and they had released the cupbearer and the chief baker, and because the cupbearer did not remember Joseph, he forgot him. 2 years later, the Pharaoh has a dream, 2 dreams, and they couldn't find anyone to interpret the dreams. then the cupbearer says, you know what? There was this Hebrew boy who, when you put me in a baker in prison, he interpreted our dreams, and the baker was killed, and I'm here. So they so they had Joseph interpret the dreams. He interprets the dreams clearly and about the future. And the Pharaoh promotes Joseph. The Pharaoh promotes Joseph. We'll continue this next week at this point. Joseph is in the dungeon. Joseph is at the bottom of the heap. But now, the star, the light of Joseph rises up. The light of Joseph, the darkness is gone. Now Joseph is set free. Now Joseph comes to light. I want you to turn to Zechariah chapter 4. Zechariah chapter 4 is the special Haftarah for today. And the Haftarah is the additional Hanukkah, because Mikeitz occurs at Hanukkah time. Zechariah chapter 4 is put up. Let's actually begin with chapter 3, verse 8. And I'm going to read it from the Hebrew. I'm going to read it in English, but use the Hebrew names that are found in the Hebrew. Now listen, High Priest Yeshua. In some of your Bibles, it probably says Joshua, but in the Hebrew, it says Yeshua. You and your friends who sit before me, for you are men of good omen. I now mean to raise my servant branch, and I intend to put aside the iniquity of this land in a single day. On that day, it is Yahweh Sabaoth who speaks. You will entertain each other under vine and fig tree. And the angel who was talking to me, for one, came back and roused me as a man is roused from his sleep. And he asked me, what can you see? I answered, as I look, this is what I see. There is a lampstand entirely of gold with a bowl on top of it. 7 lamps on the lampstand and 7 lips for the lamps on it. By it are 2 olive trees, one on the right and one on the left. Speaking again, I said to the angel who was talking to me, what do these mean, my master? And the angel talking to me replied, do you not know what these things mean? I said, no, my master. Then he gave me this answer. And again, talking about the menorah. These are the 7 eyes of Yahweh, and they cover the whole world.